Hello, everyone. This is your host, your friend, your boy, Jet Black, the one and only, here with.
Kratos, aka Soluxis.
And today we're going to be doing a collab where we talk about the Mandarin's 10 Rings. In case you guys don't know, the Shang-Chi movie has been announced. It's going to be coming in to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The first trailer dropped a few days ago. And the Shang-Chi movie is specifically subtitled Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. The Ten Rings in that subtitle are referring to the Ten Rings of the Mandarin. The Mandarin is a big Iron Man villain who we got to see a fake version of in one of the older Iron Man movies. In this film, we're supposedly going to meet the true Mandarin who's going to be using his iconic rings. His rings actually come from an alien race of dragons, which in the Marvel Comics universe is where Chinese dragons come from. These rings are sentient and they have these gemstones on them that supposedly have limitless energy. Each ring has its own unique ability. Based on talking with Kratos earlier, he's never really heard anything about Mandarin's Ten Rings, and he doesn't really know a lot about them. But based on that starting description, Kratos, what are your thoughts on the rings and their origin, and are you excited to hop in and learn more about them?
I am. Um, Especially because it has something to do with dragons.
Most def. Kratos is a big fan of dragons. So, without further ado, Kratos, we're going to hop in and we're going to start looking at these rings. Can you see the image that I posted in Discord chat?
One sec.
No worries, no worries at all. Doo 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 doo. Also, Kratos, what are your thoughts on the Infinity Stones? Because we just kind of finished the MCU like Infinity Saga, where we went through all the different Infinity Stone shenanigans. Because based on your answer, you may like the Ten Rings of the Mandarin, or you may be like, ah, this shit again. Like, what was your perception on them?
Um, I don't know. It's fine. Um, for me, there's an element to it that I like and that I don't like. I like that it gives you magic abilities or like it gives you additional abilities, gives you powers, that kind of thing. That I like. But I'm a much bigger fan of internal abilities like Doctor Strange, for example. I love Doctor Strange's abilities because they weren't given to him. Not anyone could just pick up a ring and be able to do what Doctor Strange does. I like that it's internal, it's his own will. It's all within him, his inner power. Um, that's what I when I like abilities the most. I don't really like abilities that are given or that are drawn from an item.
Understandable. If I understand you correctly, it sounds like you prefer stuff like the X-Men's abilities that they get genetically through their X gene more than you would like something like the Nova Corps and their like helmets or the Green Lantern Corps and their rings kind of thing.
Exactly.
Okay, understandable. Well, it sounds like you're gonna like the special power element of these rings, but you may not like the fact that they are rings and it is a thing where you wear them and you get the abilities. How do you feel about the fact that, unlike the way that the Infinity Stones were shown in the previous films, based on what I've read about these rings, the rings themselves are sentient? Because in that way, it kind of is like they do possess their own power. It's almost more like they're sharing that power with the wearer in a way. What are your thoughts on that?
That I do like a lot more. Um,
Ballin'.
is there an established way to communicate with the rings and like understand what they may be thinking or feeling?
That's a really good question. So I will be completely transparent with you, Kratos. While I have looked a lot into the rings, I haven't read a lot of the stories that actually feature the rings. A lot of the research I've done has been looking at charts. A lot of the charts actually show the older version of the Ten Rings, which have different abilities. These Ten Rings that I'm showing in this image now on Discord were shown in a 2010 Iron Man annual So this is like the more recent incarnation. It seems a lot easier to find a lot of information about the older rings, and a lot of YouTube videos that go over Mandarin's rings will show this picture that you see and still read the fucking old description for the rings for whatever reason. So I'm not sure like what the communication method is with trying to like communicate with the sentient rings. I actually was surprised to learn they were sentient. One of my guidebooks that I own actually listed them as sentient, and that's what like threw me. I was like, "What?" Because I haven't actually seen that anywhere else.
Yeah. So something that these really remind me of is the main character's weapon in the book series Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard. Um,
Tell me more.
we I just finished it like a few days ago, but it's a Rick Riordan book, so it's in the same universe as Percy Jackson, the Olympians, Heroes of Olympus, all of that. But the main character Magnus Chase, he is Annabeth's cousin. I don't know if you know anything about the Percy Jackson books, um, and he is the son of the Norse god Frey, which is kind of like the basically the god of healing, light. I would kind of compare it to the Apollo of Norse mythology, kind of like in the same way Thor is the Zeus of Norse mythology. Um, so, in that book, Magnus has a sword called Sumerbrander, um, and the sword is fully sentient. Like it can talk like English, communicate with people, and like not only the wielder, like everybody around can hear the sword, and it can even like hover itself. So like you don't even have to like hold it to attack with it. You can just send the sword off to go fight, and it'll just hover in the air and like fight as if someone is holding it, but no one has to hold it. And it gives Magnus, it strengthens Magnus's abilities for like healing and disarming and all of that. And one really interesting like drawback of it is anything that the sword does not being wielded, like say the sword goes and fights a really difficult monster and kills it. As soon as Magnus, picks up the sword again and holds it again, all of the energy that he would have spent by doing all those actions himself hit him all at once. So
Mm.
like the wariness and the injuries and all that that would have come from actually attacking that monster all hits him at one time. So it usually like causes him to like pass out immediately after picking up the sword. Um, and like it's like the whole story, throughout the whole story it's a really interesting and really cool dynamic between Magnus and the sword. With the sword knowing a lot because it's an ancient sword, so it knows a lot about the mythology and the world around them, so it kind of acts like a mentor as well. And it also gives Magnus advice, and is like able to understand like, hey Magnus, if I just killed this giant over here. If you grab me, you will pass out. So don't do it yet. I will hover. I'll levitate. Don't grab me yet.
That.
Um, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, my bad. I didn't mean to interrupt. I was gonna say that does sound really cool. Please continue.
I was just saying that kind of reminds me of the rings. That's why my first question was like, is there any like known communication method to the rings? Because a really, big thing that I like about the Sumer Brander thing is that everybody is actively able to communicate with it and
I would
vice versa.
I would definitely have to look into it a little bit more, like past just looking at like charts of what the rings can do, seeing like the rings in a story and seeing whether or not the Mandarin like talks to the rings, or since he's an Iron Man villain, if Iron Man ever like speaks to the rings and if the rings speak back. Because when the guidebook said they were sentient, it didn't go into any additional detail. It like name drops like, hey, they're sentient, and it kind of threw me. But that would be cool if they do operate in a similar capacity. When you mentioned that the sword When he grabs it, he then like feels the weariness of wielding it. It kind of reminded me of another element of the rings. When John Mason and I were talking about the Mandarin's 10 rings in another video, make sure you guys check that out, we compared them to the Infinity Stones, because in the same way that the Infinity Stones seem like they have some kind of like infinite power, these rings have limitless energy. But John Mason was talking about how in the Marvel movies, it seems like using the Infinity Gauntlet, using all those stones, has some kind of wear and tear on the body. And he was saying that these rings seem like they'd be better if there's no cost. And from what I can tell from watching like a few videos about it, the cost seems to be that you start to kind of become an alien dragon creature. At the very least, your hands do. I don't know if it extends all the way down or if it depends on how much you use the rings or how long you wear the rings. But if anything, it seems like that's like a plus, in my opinion. What are your thoughts on that?
I do think that's interesting. Um, I kind of like the fact that there's a drawback to it. Um, does that drawback affect the Mandarin at all?
So this is when I go back to my lack of knowledge. So I've seen like a bunch of graphs and charts and like guidebook stuff, and I've watched videos where I think the Mandarin has gotten like dragon hands before. Someone please correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section below. I'm not sure if I've ever seen full on this nigga's actually just a dragon now kind of thing. Ryan and I are thinking about doing a 10 Rings video, but I did talk to him a little bit over the phone about it, and he was wondering if there's like a old Mandarin book, like similar to like a Old Man Logan thing, where he is just a full dragon. And I don't know, but that sounds cool for sure.
Yeah,
That
that
wouldn't,
wouldn't surprise me.
yeah, that wouldn't surprise me either. That sounds cool. I guess my question to you would be, would you wear the 10 rings knowing that you could potentially just lose your humanity?
So you're asking me if I would want to use powerful rings and actively become a dragon as I do it? Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking you.
S- Yeah, without any hesitation at all.
Interesting. I'm curious how it would like affect like relationships and like careers and stuff like that. I get the concept of, well, fuck it, I'm a dragon, but like, what if you had like your dream job, you had like your dream like family, whatever setup that is for you.
What
You
is
had,
what, what is my boss gonna fire me?
can you still do your job as an alien dragon or whatever?
I don't know, but my boss sure as hell won't stop paying me.
Ooh, got him. The way that we've been doing these videos in the past has been we go over each and every ring, one ring at a time, and like we get your thoughts on them. Do you mind if instead of doing that, I read over the 10 rings real fast, like rapid succession, and then afterwards, after we know what each ring does, we like talk about it. The John Mason video, we like went a little over because we were like trying to hit it one by one, and it was a very like slow progression kind of thing.
Mhm. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, ballin'.
I think it would be interesting to also, if we have time, try to do like a ranking thing, try and rank the rings from worst to best, or like strongest to weakest, that kind of thing.
Ballin'. I
But
would
if you had to choose only one ring, what would you choose?
almost definitely. I'm down to do that. John Mason tried to do that at the end, like he ranked them, but at that point we like had to end it. I think we'll definitely have time to do that for sure. So I'm gonna start from left to right, just kind of like the normal way you'd read through, and I'm just gonna go back to back, ring to ring, and then afterwards we'll go over it. So the first ring on the thumb of the, I'm not gonna be that specific. Starting from the left,
Right.
the Remaker Ring. The Remaker Ring shatters and reimagines relationships on a subatomic level. So it essentially allows you to like break down and rearrange like subatomic particles. You can just kind of like rebuild stuff. Next up, we got the influence ring, which creates various forces that cause a body to undergo change. The way that I've been interpreting that has been like a shape shifting kind of thing.
or like mutations.
Right. Spin decelerates time around the wearer, appears as super speed to the watcher. Then we got the
Hmm.
spectral ring, winds up and warps the air itself, can appear ghostly, can appear not at all. The way that we've been interpreting that is like air bending, invisibility, and the ability to look like almost like you're like a transparent thing. We don't think it's that you get ghost powers. You can look like a
Right.
ghost, you can be invisible, and you can control the wind. Next up, we got the
And I
Nightbringer.
mean, or sorry, we'll talk about it later. Keep going.
Oh, no worries, my dude. Next up, we got the Nightbringer creates malleable darkness, a dark light. The way that we've been interpreting that is kind of like Raven's like dark constructs, like Raven from the Teen Titans. That's what we think the Nightbringer does. Um,
I don't know. I think it would be. Oh, sorry, I keep forgetting. Keep
Oh,
going.
no worries at all. Next up, we got the Zero Ring. So the Zero Ring opens a beam of nothingness from the icy heart of outer space, creates a deafening boom as the vacuum is filled. So this one is kind of weird. The way you can interpret this a whole lot of ways. The way that I've interpreted it,
Maybe.
yeah, like it could be a black hole, like it could be like a like 0 point energy kind of thing. The way that I've interpreted it in past videos has been the idea that like when it opens up nothingness, it's kind of like all the air and like heat and stuff is like sucked away from a location because it talks about like the icy heart of outer space. So I imagine that it like freezes you, but I also not the wearer, but like whoever you shoot it at. But then I also imagine that when it talks about it creates a deafening boom as the vacuum is filled, that like then all the surrounding air gets sucked inward to the point where you shot it. So then you get like you sonic clap whoever you froze, like you shatter them. But now that I'm rereading it, it does kind of sound like a black hole. Like I may just be misinterpreting it. Next up, we got the liar. So the liar creates world upon world of illusory fable, as impossible to escape as a tangle of dreams, but vexes the wearer as well. After that, we got ballin'. I agree. It is one of like the better rings, I would say. After that, we got lightning. Lightning creates a directable electrical atmospheric discharge, so you can shoot lightning. Next up, we got incandescence. It contains the miniature heart of a star and scorches the air before it. And then finally, we have daimonic, the irresistible urge that propels. Oh, well, incandescence, you can shoot fire. That's what I meant to say. I didn't describe it further. My bad. Uh, daimonic, the irresistible urge that propels into the unknown, the compulsive, creates loyalty, creates obsession. So we interpreted this as kind of like a mind control kind of thing. Yeah. But it seems to be like specifically like I don't think it's mind control in the idea of you specifically like hypnotize someone into doing a certain thing. It's just people in general are loyal to you, and at that point, it's not hypnosis anymore. You just can tell them to do stuff, and because they obsess over you and are loyal, they just kind of do it. Um,
Right.
Now that we've gone over the 10 rings, because there are quite a few rings to look at, I would like to ask you just in general the question that you asked me earlier. If you had to have one of these rings and only one of these rings, which would you choose and why?
That's tough.
Agreed. I personally, maybe how, here's a easier question. What are your top three? And we'll narrow down from there.
So I would, as for my top three, I would probably do influence for one. Um,
Interesting. So it's interesting that influence was your first pick in the top three. It's the first one that you knew is definitely going in there.
I'll explain why in a second, but I'll do influence, the liar, and Nightbringer.
Whoa. Okay, so Nightbringer felt very much so like a unexpected, out of left field pick. Okay, okay. So with those being your three, what is your top two? You gotta eliminate one of the. I'm laughing a little bit because I feel like I know what it's gonna be. What's gonna get kicked out? What if you had to lower it to your top two? Who gets dropped? He might surprise me again though. You might say something crazy gets dropped.
All right, my top two, influence and Nightbringer.
What? See, I feel like that is you just saying it. Is that true? Is it really that's your
Yeah,
two? Wow.
yeah.
Wow. Okay. Fuck then. What's your number one between Influence and Nightbringer then?
Influence.
Okay. So real quick, I'm gonna give my reaction to like your top three, your top two, and then like your number one. So I definitely understand why you have influence in there, especially when talking about like the Marvel universe. The idea of being able to shapeshift or to mutate seems really powerful because what limits are there on that? Can you just become any kind of like X-Men style mutant you want through like your
That
own force of
like
will?
right, you can like mutate your body to where you just have superpowers. Like you could mutate your body to where, oh, now I can just shoot fire or I can just shoot lightning, you know, or like mutate your body to where like, oh, now I can run super fast. You know, like you can give yourself superpowers.
Agreed. Like I totally see the appeal of influence. Now,
And that
we
goes directly into what I was talking about earlier about how I like abilities that are more internal than they just come from an object that you have to have that object to, be able to use the power. What's to stop me from giving myself all these powers with the ring and then I can get rid of the ring and or put it in a safe place and then now I have all these abilities that are internal and not dependent on an outside object.
That makes a lot of sense to be like it tracks with what we were talking about before. So I definitely get where you're coming from on that. Um, Now I will say, John Mason heavily critiqued like the phrasing of each of these, and he said that influence was kind of booty because unlike the other ones where it's like it just kind of happens, not all of them just kind of happen, it has to create the forces that then cause the body to undergo change. But we were kind of looking at it like a fight at the time. Like if someone had one of the other rings, let's say there's like clones of you, right? And a clone of you is trying to kill you and you're trying to kill the clone. Both of you can like control your rings with your thoughts. So at the speed of thought, whatever you want your ring to do, it's gonna do it. John Mason was like, well, it doesn't matter if influence could give you all kinds of powers, because first it creates the forces, and then those forces give you powers. But if I use like a lot of the other rings on you, they have direct effects rather than like indirect effects, where you have to like do something first to facilitate what you're trying to do. So while you're creating the forces to mutate you, the remaker could be like, and now you're a rock. Like I just skipped to the part where I shattered you, and now you're like made into something else. What are your thoughts on that?
I would say um when it comes to like the whole idea that I have with the influence thing, it wouldn't be something you activate in the moment. It would be something you've already activated to already give yourself the mutations before you even get yourself into a fight.
I 100% agree with that. Like, I think that is the way that you would go with it. I think that's part of the reason why John Mason was like, but that's what makes it booty, though, in this quick draw. Because there are just other rings you could have where you don't need to, like, have prep time or whatever. You could
Well,
just, like,
with how loose the restrictions are on it, and like how it doesn't really give you any restriction on how how you change, or like what the limitations are of changing. You could literally just mutate yourself to where you are unaffected by any of the other rings. Like, none of the other rings have any effect on you.
that's fair. It sounds like you still would need to prep it. Because what John Mason is thinking is that, like, first you summon some kind of aura or some kind of like other energy to get the change started. But if he just has something that goes off instantly, it's like you're done. Like, I definitely agree. If you have the ability to prepare ahead of time or to like use your power first, like you get the drop on a clone, or maybe it's like a stealth thing, you just get them. But it just seems like you end up in weird bad matchups based on like a quick draw. And I know that's such a like niche thing, but it does sound like you do kind of get fucked in that scenario, depending on I guess a number of factors, like whether or not those forces are practically instant or like things of that nature.
Right. I don't know. The only thing that I would say about it is, like, are we thinking like a thing where you and your clones just all find a pile of these rings and you all just pick one and then immediately like attack each other? Or would you have already had the rings when you go into the fight, and now you just have a split second to choose what ring you use and attack?
So the way that we were talking about it is almost like if you were like starting a video game and the first thing is like equipped to you is one ring and there's one other clone of you that has another ring and like the fight starts when the game starts kind of thing, which could be a cool game, to be honest.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, that could be fun. um
That I could understand. I think it would just come down to the um the speed of everything else. Um but like, just in general of having the rings, I think influence would be one of the better ones, other than that one really specific scenario where you just start off not knowing anything about the rings but just having them, and then you have to choose. But like, in any other situation, if you would have like already had a ring, you would have been able to mutate yourself to be unaffected by the other rings, or hell, unaffected by anything in the world ever. Like, not affected by hunger, by I can't die, I can't be affected by death, I can't be affected by the other rings. Like, all it would take is 1 second of just having the ring to do all that. Um, so in the very specific situation where you and one other person both get the rings at the exact same time, and that's when when you have to try to attack the other person first, that's when I would say, okay, yes, the influence may lose to that. But in any other situation where you would have had the ring for just a second longer, then it would have to be better than all the other ones.
So John Mason would probably hit you up and say, it's interesting to try and like speak for him in this, but it a lot of the things from the previous video I'm thinking about now, he would argue that the Remaker Ring can pretty much do anything the other rings can do, somewhat. I do think some of the rings may be outside of what the Remaker would be capable of, but he would probably argue what's the difference between like breaking down and reconstructing like your genes using the Remaker Ring to give yourself mutations, while also being able to just do that regardless with anything and not have to do the create various forces thing, versus the influence ring, which only can really like make your body undergo changes, not necessarily like shatter and reimagine the relationships of things on a subatomic level. I feel like you could counter by saying, well, I can just give myself the power to do that. But with the Remaker Ring, it's like you're kind of already starting with a better power that could kind of let you do the same thing. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm not sure.
Fair, fair. Let's see. Your top three were
Okay, so the Remaker Ring,
right.
it says it shatters and reimagines relationships. It doesn't
Mm,
add relationships. It doesn't add molecules. It doesn't add things. It just breaks apart what's already there and rearranges it.
right.
So with the Remaker Ring, if you don't already have the genes required to give yourself powers, then you wouldn't be able to. But with the influence, it creates. That's the difference. The Remaker rearranges and reconstructs and shatters and rebuilds. The influence ring creates.
So that's an interesting counter to what I think John Mason would say. I feel like the way that he would retort back would be to say, well, how do you know that you can't take like your existing DNA and break it down like because you're not just breaking it down on like a nucleic acid level, like subatomic level. If you rearrange it from like a quark scale or some bullshit like that, could you not make it where like now you have like the X gene? Because we're talking about like the building blocks of the building blocks of the building blocks. But I feel
Yeah,
like
what you're saying. But the big thing there is that even if you're able to take parts of you and like completely change the atoms to a completely different atom, you're able to do all that, you still only have that same set of atoms or the same number of atoms to work with. So there's still a limit to what you can do because you can't introduce more than what's already there. But with the influence ring, you it it creates the forces, it adds to it rather than just changing what's already there.
that's fair. I do think you have a very solid argument there. Like you could use the influence ring to potentially like do anything. It seems like give yourself like any mutation, any ability. Whereas with the remaker ring, if you wanted to turn like a mouse into like a brick of gold as big as your head, you probably couldn't do that because the mouse isn't as big as your head. Like you don't have like more mass to work with, kind of thing.
Right. And then, so for like the Remaker thing, if you were to give yourself powers, you would have to eat up your own atoms that make you to turn them into, something with powers. And being able to, like, because that's another thing, is the Remaker ring doesn't necessarily say that it gives you like any natural like sense for what atoms do what. So like you could use the Remaker ring to try and give yourself powers, and you could just end up killing yourself right there because you accidentally converted your like a part of your heart that you needed to survive. You converted that into these genes that give you powers, and you just kill yourself right there. You just stop your heart, you're dead. Um, but with the influence ring, because it's made to develop the body and it adds to it instead of just changing stuff, it adds to it. You don't have that risk of accidentally killing yourself or harming yourself, or you just don't have that kind of limitation.
That's cool. I do like your argument for the influence ring. You've given the strongest argument for the influence ring that I've heard so far. But now I gotta ask you, because you were fucking wildin' with this. I know you really like dark and light based powers. Why the Nightbringer though? Over like, because I know you're like the Remaker isn't as good as influence, but is the Remaker worse than Nightbringer?
um n- no, I wouldn't say. Well, I don't know. I think it depends. Mm, hold on.
No worries, take your time, my dude.
So for the Nightbringer, I don't think it's one of the best ones. It would definitely be one of the most fun to use, and definitely has a. Um, I think it's more versatile than the Remaker, because it, just like for the influence, it creates instead of changes. So Remaker, like what you're saying with like the mouse to gold, you still have the same amount of atoms to work with. With Nightbringer, it creates. So you could create a construct that you would want to make from the, using the Remaker, but you don't have to convert anything to make that construct. You just add, you just create it. So um, I think it could be more versatile and more beneficial just because of the word create.
I've noticed that every single one you picked in your top three, creates was the first word.
Yes.
So I guess you decided that like creating darkness constructs would probably be better than lightning. Tell us more about like how you chose between those two because they both start with create. Though I will personally admit the lightning one does sound a little bit basic compared to a lot of the other rings.
That, like when we were going through, I'm like, this one opens a beam of nothingness, decelerates time, shatters and reimagines relationships on a subatomic level, and then, oh, I can shoot lightning.
Fair.
I mean, even the fire one contains the miniature heart of a star. Oh, I just shoot lightning.
You're right. It is probably one of the like most low key ones.
But the main reason why I choose Nightbringer over lightning is because lightning isn't solid. Lightning is a plasma, so you can't really create a construct of it, or like even if you could like contain like some kind of solid structure out of it, that would be lethal to you as well. Whereas the Nightbringer, you're able to create something that's tangible, that's physical, that you can, like, you could create a throne out of darkness and sit on it. Or, if you wanted to be on the offensive, you could create like 100 spears or arrows made of darkness and just fire it at your opponent. That would probably do just as much damage to someone as a lightning bolt would, but with added versatility.
So you brought up something really interesting when you mentioned the spears. John Mason and I talked a good bit about Spectral versus Nightbringer versus Lightning, maybe versus Zero. Like the concept of all these things where you could potentially shoot something and like the speed. Do you think Nightbringer is the fastest, like I shoot you ring out of all the rings? Why or why not?
Yeah, because um, isn't the speed of darkness the same as the speed of light?
See, that's what I argued too. Okay, yeah, like that's what I was thinking. Like it should probably outpace the lightning blast. I have no idea what the fuck zero is. What's the speed of
Because light,
nothing?
right? Because lightning. even though it has the word light in its name, it doesn't move at the speed of light. It's just plasma. Even like the speed of light, like the light of the lightning strike getting to us travels faster than the lightning strike itself moves.
Right.
Um, Now, a beam of nothingness. Hmm. I think the beam of nothingness would depend on what it has to get through, or like what it has to remove, I guess.
That's interesting. Uh, yeah, that is really weird. So if you shot a beam of nothingness and you put like your fist against a wall when you shot, do you think it like drills a hole like into the wall with the beam? Like how, because it is such an odd description.
Right. Like I don't I couldn't see how it would just be like an immediate beam that just like instantaneously removes everything in it. I think it would have to work more as a drill. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to control what it actually removes.
Maybe it's called zero because it's like a disintegration rate. I feel like this one has such a weird description. I keep like reinterpreting what it is. I don't know if it's ice sonic boom or black hole or if it's like literally it's just a disintegration ray.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I also I just have no idea.
Now, a couple things about the Nightbringer that I was thinking of. Um, you don't necessarily have to blast it because you just create the darkness. So you could literally look at your enemy, or just look at whoever you're fighting, and you could just like fill their entire body with solid darkness that just suffocates them immediately, crushes their heart. You can just immediately crush them in darkness from the inside out.
Huh. So now you're bringing up something interesting that I don't think anyone mentioned before you. But for any one of them that says that you like create the thing, couldn't you do the same thing with like lightning? Like instead of you shooting the lightning, could you create the lightning inside of their body? They're just electrocuted from the inside out kind of thing?
Mm, maybe.
Yeah, like it's interesting. I think we have like an assumption probably based off of stuff like Green Lantern that like if you
Mhm.
create a thing, it like comes out of the ring. But I guess there's no real way to know unless we were to look at actual feats of the
No, I think
Mandarin,
I
which I
think
probably should do.
when it comes to the lightning one and knowing if you could just create it from anywhere, I think our best bet is to look at the wording, because Nightbringer, the wording, it just says creates the thing. That's all it says. But lightning specifically says creates a directable electrical atmospheric discharge. So maybe the like added words on there like directable or atmospheric, maybe those may like add those kind of restrictions to it.
I see where you're coming from, but I mentally am like yes and no. Because I remember watching a video one time where someone was trying to explain like what it would be like if you had lightning powers or whatever, like if you could shoot lightning. And I think in the video they were indicating that like even if you tried to like aim a lightning bolt, like you just had the power to fire it, there's no guarantee that you're going to hit what you're trying to hit just because of how lightning works. It gets attracted to stuff.
Yeah, and it would just go to wherever the imbalance of electrons are, and it would take the fastest route there. So,
Right.
like, if you were, I don't know, because I've seen a video. Game Theory made a video talking about it under the context of electric type Pokemon, like how their moves don't really work because of how electricity and lightning actually works. Um, if we were to go based off of just physics, for, like using realistic physics for the lightning ring, that makes it even worse because you would have to be up super close to the enemy. You would have to basically be touching them to be able to deliver the electric shock to them. And even worse, actually, the ring, you would try to send electricity out, but the path of least resistance to the ground, which would have the most imbalance of electrons, would actually be yourself. So immediately when you try to fire lightning, you would just immediately electrocute yourself. If the lightning was to come out of the ring. So if that lightning were to come out of the ring, it would just go straight into yourself and you would just fry your own body.
Right.
But if you were able to like create it from a distance away, then I could see that. But I don't really know how that would be possible because even like Thor, for example, who can summon lightning, it still has to come from the sky. Like it still has to come from somewhere that's able to create electricity or that's able to create the lightning, I guess.
So I would say it I don't think it has to come from the ring. And the reason why I say that is because a lot of the other rings where it specifically involves you, it'll like say that it does. For example, for spin, it decelerates time around the wearer. It like makes sure to be very specific that it's like it goes around you rather than just letting you decelerate time like in general anywhere kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um
Right.
so I feel like in a similar way that you can create forces with influence or create malleable darkness with Nightbringer, I feel like with lightning, it's saying that you can create lightning, but not necessarily that you just shoot lightning. Zero specifically is like you open a beam of nothingness from icy outer space or whatever, which honestly, fuck, Zero has so many interpretations. Does it literally come from outer space? Like, does it shoot down? Like, now I'm like more lost the more I think about it. Um,
Um, Another thing about lightning is the word directable. That's what makes me think that it comes from the ring because if you could just create it anywhere, then that would imply that it's already directable. So the fact that they had to add the word directable may mean that you can't just create it from anywhere. You could create it from where you are, aka where the ring is, but you can direct it anywhere, but not that it can just be summoned anywhere because if it could be summoned anywhere, then that automatically is directable.
so I disagree with that. I feel like if I could summon lightning anywhere, that doesn't necessarily mean that from where I summon it, I can have it go in a specific direction. Like if I wanted to summon lightning above my apartment complex,
Yeah.
it could summon above, but then it could shoot up or like into the lake or like into the complex or into like a tree nearby. I think directable is like not only do I get to pick where it's created, but then also where, like what direction it's gonna go in, kind of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. I still do think Lightbringer would be better for creating like an internal death on your opponent, because we've already established Nightbringer would be faster, um, just because Darkness is able to move faster than Lightning. Um, and not only that, but like coming into immediate contact with electricity, even like with a lightning strike, wouldn't like kill you immediately. Like it takes time for the electricity to get all throughout, um, like where in your body it would actually kill you. And of course, there's cases of people being struck by lightning and surviving. Um, I think it would depend on where you summon the lightning at in them, but I still think darkness would be more efficient.
Okay, I see where you're coming.
Fewer variables because lightning is unpredictable and hard to control. But with the Nightbringer, you're able to control darkness like really accurately.
I see where you're coming from, my dude. Do you think Nightbringer, like a Nightbringer user, could beat a spin user? Why or why not?
Hmm.
Because you have the concept of the Nightbringer essentially moving at the speed of light, but you also have someone who's like literally defying the rules of time that you're fighting.
Well, it doesn't say how fast or how slow the spin like manipulates time. And if you really think about it, if you are like slowing down time itself, if that were to have an effect on the Nightbringer, that means it would also have an effect on light itself, meaning you going super fast would put yourself at a disadvantage because you slowing down everything around you will also slow down the light reaching your eyes, making you not able to see, like it wouldn't be the advantage that you would think it is. Okay, yeah, you can move fast, but you still see everything at the speed that it would have already been moving.
I see where you're coming from on that. That
I
reminds me. Oh, I'm sorry, buddy.
I did not do a good job explaining that at all, but
No, you totally did. I see where you're coming from. If the light is coming in slower, it could be a situation where you just have trouble seeing, or you literally can't see because the light is taking so long to reach your eyes, you're blind. There's a
right,
character in My Hero who has can't remember the fucking word, intangibility, and he brings up stuff like that you'd never think about. Like if you just phase through stuff, you would lose
right,
access to your ability to like see because the light would phase through you, kind of thing.
right. Same thing with like invisibility. If you're invisible, that means the light isn't hitting your eyes, so you're also blind.
Mm. Yeah, that is interesting. Does that make spectral worse?
I don't know. Hmm. I mean, it said can appear ghostly and can appear not at all. So I'd say it's more of an optional thing. Like,
So you have the
mm,
choice to suck.
and I do think it's interesting that the spectral almost seems to have like a spectrum of opacity. Like, you don't have to choose visible and not visible. You can go like almost invisible, but maybe you can see. Maybe if you're like almost invisible, it's harder to see you, and it's also more difficult to see your surroundings, but you're not blind.
Right. That's interesting. Also, we're like hitting like 1 minute left kind of thing. Real quick, hit me up with like your speed tiering of like these rings.
Shit. So Nightbringer one, that's the best one. Um, the worst one, Remaker. No, I'm just kidding. Um, I don't know. I wouldn't be able to do that in 1 minute.
Okay. Well, at the very least, we know your top three. Hit us up with your bottom three, I guess, before we dip out.
Um, I'd say zero just because of how, that's down there on the bottom just because of how weird it is and how situational it seems. Um, I'd say Diamonic. I don't really have. I wouldn't ever really need a an ability to help me gain loyal followers or anything like that.
My boy's
Um,
bugging. He's bugging so hard. What?
well, what happens when you make me like make this decision in like a minute?
Understandable.
And then I'd say incandescence is also down there because lightning could just create fire. So why would I need a separate thing that can also create fire?
Understandable. Like the redundancy aspect of it.
Right. And I
Okay.
think lightning is more versatile than just fire by itself, anyways.
I agree with that. So it seems like the only rings that like didn't come up in a top three or a bottom three were spin and spectral. So do you feel like those two are just
Mhm.
kind of like in the middle?
Yeah, I'd say they're closer to the top than they are the bottom, but definitely more in the middle.
Makes sense to me. I mean, now you've made the list more or less. Dun, 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 dun. Thank you for coming on, my dude. It's always fun hanging out with you. My question to you, where can people find your content and what are you currently working on?
You can find my channel, Soluxis, Soluxis. Um, right now, I am not working on too much, but this Friday, I'm getting a new laptop, and that is going to, greatly improve what I can do and all that. So I'll have a lot more content coming out shortly.
Didn't you like just drop a lyric video?
Kind of. So I finished it. It's just not public yet.
Ah, okay. Well, that's something that people could look forward to, right?
Yeah.
Ballin'. Hey guys, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, Kratos, for hanging out with me. Definitely make sure to subscribe to Soluxis' channel. And thank you all once again. Kratos, do you have anything that you'd like to say before we dippity doop dop out?
I'm sorry. One more time.
Oh, no worries. I was like, is there anything you'd like to say before we dippity doop dop out?
Nope. I'm good.
Well, thank you for coming on. Truly appreciate it. This is your host, your friend, your boy, Jump Like the One Only here with
Kratos, aka Soluxis.
Logging Out. Peace, guys. I do have to leave the call as well. So I love you, dude. I hope you have a happy, fun night. I'll talk to you again soon.
Love you too. You too. Bye.
Peace. Check it about.